This program is entitled Family Reunions and originally aired in February of 2003. Now, here's how that broadcast got underway.
You grow just by being around them, and then just the fun you get to have together, to be able to relax together and spend time together and build additional memories for children. And if I could recommend it to every family, I would. It can just be an incredible addition to what life is about. I just get excited, yeah.
If you've not been together with your family very much recently, whether that's immediate or extended family, you may just be missing out on one of the best things that could ever happen to you. You'll find out why on today's Focus on the Family broadcast. I'm John Fuller, and our guest host today is Janet Parshall. She hails from Washington, D.C., that area, and she's sitting in for Dr. James Dobson today. Janet is the host of our Renewing the Heart Women's Call-In broadcast, which airs on nearly 200 radio stations around the U.S. every Saturday morning at noon. She's a host of a 3-hour national talk show as well, which is called Janet Parshall's America. And I don't know, Mrs. Parshall, you're a busy lady, and yet you can fly in and help us out. It's really great to have you here today.
John, you know how much I love doing this with you, and I'll tell you what, we always make time for family, and Focus on the Family is part of my family, so I love making time to be here. I have to tell you also, I'm particularly excited about what we're going to talk about today, family reunions. You know, you can talk about them, you can see them in movies, everybody's got a point of reference, but, you know, I think there's a whole purpose here, a whole sense of intentionality, and I certainly think back on my life. We had some marvelous family reunions when I grew up, and maybe I'll share a couple of those stories. But first, I want to bring in our guest, because these are the perfect folks, I think, to talk about family. First, I'm going to make her blush, but I've learned an awful lot about being a mother and a new grandmother from my friend Susan Yeats, who's a wonderful author, who's been married to her husband John, who's a pastor for 33 years. She has 5 children, and Susan, last count, 3 grandchildren.
That's right.
Oh, I tell you, you got to teach me, okay? I'm new to this business. But I'll tell you what Susan has done, too. In her writings, and she's a regular contributor to Today's Christian Woman, and she speaks all over the globe on marriage and on family. She really is so practical-minded when it comes to family, and I'm anxious to hear some of the suggestions that she has for us today as well. But I'm also excited to see what Greg Asimakoupoulos has to say to us. Did I get it right, Greg?
Are you part Greek?
Just in the New Testament.
Asimakoupoulos, you did great.
Thank you, sir. You are an ordained minister and a freelance writer, and you contribute to such great publications as Focus on the Family, Leadership Journal, and Christian Parenting Today. But I'm so looking forward to the fact that your pen oftentimes gets dipped into poetic ink, and you're going to share with us on that as well. So I'm looking forward to what you have to say. And you're married, and you have 3 daughters.
3 beautiful daughters.
3 daughters, wow. And their names are?
Kristen, Allison, and Lauren Starr.
Now, why did I think they'd be Greek?
Well, they have a Greek last name.
Again, we are so glad that both of you are with us today. And I think maybe it would be good, John, for us to start with a working definition of family reunion. That's probably a very subjective, probably very emotional word for our listeners today. Everybody has a point of reference. But Susan, let me ask you, you are a strong believer that when one is purposely putting together a reunion, it shouldn't be viewed as an event. Tell us why.
Well, I think too often we look to the events, the family reunions or the weddings or even the funerals or the special occasions to make us close. But the reality is that it's what goes on between the reunions that builds closeness, so that the reunions themselves become a celebration of what's going on the rest of the year. So I think we have to have realistic expectations for a family reunion. They're a piece, but they're not the be-all and end-all of making a family close.
Craig, what do you think about that? Same thing? It's not just, I mean, you think sometimes, well, we had that event in the summer, therefore we've done our obligation, we've made our family. Exactly. We've made our family connection, and that's it, we can move on. What Susan is implying is that it's simply kind of a watermark in this ongoing relationship building between family members.
That's true if you have the privilege to live close to one another.
Right.
But if you are scattered, and increasingly that's so in a disconnected society, it takes an event to plan towards, to kind of come together and maybe re-engage in ways that because of the miles and the distance, the years, you haven't been as close as you once were.
Oh, now see, you were honest, so let me dig a little bit deeper with the honesty on that. Somebody listening might be saying, well, that's great for Greg and Susan. Sounds like they've had wonderful experiences, and obviously family is extremely important to them. But I would rather do anything than have a family reunion because it represents unfulfilled dreams, disconnected relationships, and quite frankly, some hurts and some lack of forgiveness that I haven't found. Why would I, if I'm that person, want a family reunion?
It also, I think, represents the possibility of redemption and new beginnings. And if it's planned right, some wonderful, poignant times of laughter, shared memories, tears, and creating some memories then that becomes a foundation that you can build on, not only for the next event, the official reunion down the road, but for what Susan has indicated, and that is picking up where maybe we have left off in the past.
Exactly. All right, let's get practical. Susan, let me start with you because, again, you've been such a practical teacher for me in my life. What are some practical ways to do it? And let's start with a vibrant family where communication is open, where there's constant affirmation with members, whether they're disconnected geographically, but they're connected emotionally. Start with a healthy family first to put a reunion together.
Well, I think first you even have to go a step further and define, is it my immediate family or is it a larger extended family? Because the dynamics are going to be different.
Key point.
So first, if it's just your family, for example, as you know, we have 5 kids, and now all 5 of our kids are married, so we have 10 kids. And this past January, we had our very first own family couples retreat, my husband and I and our 10 kids. And and we're all spread out all over the country. But that had a specific focus where we could really be more intentional about sharing our hearts. We went around each day, and one couple took turns to say, what has God been teaching me this year, and what do I need prayer for? And then after each couple had their turn, and it was usually over a dinner time, we would pray over that couple. And so that we were able to do because it was smaller. Everybody is close. And the dynamics were, in a sense, safe. But now you take a larger family reunion, like Greg's talking about, and you have to be different. So I'd say the first step is to think, what is the group? And what do I need to do to enable this to be a success? And so defining which group you're after is important.
All right, you started with the nuclear, the smaller family.
We started with the nuclear.
Let me go, Greg, to you with the extended family. Sometimes many of us will be walking through the mall and somebody will pass us and it'll say Smith Family Reunion Summer 1972. And I always smile and I think, I hope that was a good time for that individual. Obviously, if they're wearing the shirt, maybe it's indicative that it was a good time for them. But go to the next concentric circle of family, the extended family. First of all, my first response as a woman who works, and I bet there's a lot of working women who have the same thought, is where would you find the time to do something like that? Sounds to me like it's got to be a decision of the heart and the head before you pick up the phone.
It has to be a decision of the want to, and it takes someone within the family that really believes that this is necessary and a desirable thing to be the key point planner person. I grew up loving to swing from the limbs of family trees. I remember going to my first reunion as a 12-year-old kid, and there were 100 of the extended family. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. It was great. Instead of just hearing about weird old Uncle Harold, I got to finally meet him. So when it came time for my wife's parents to have their 50th wedding anniversary, they chose not to have the typical cake and coffee reception at church. They said, since our kids are scattered in 5 different states, why don't we plan a mutual location? Let's go back to where we honeymooned 50 years earlier. They'd never been back to Seaside, Oregon since that time. Wow. So that's where we all joined together and spent a week. There were 21 of us. It's not all that different from, Susan, what you and your husband did with your kids, now grown. Ours was the next circle beyond that with the grandkids. So there were the mom and dad, their 4 kids, each with their spouse, and then the grandchildren for a week on the beach. And it took planning. My Wendy, my wife, was the one that was the initiator and kind of played that role that I think is, in speaking of practical steps, that's what you have to have. Somebody that will make the commitment, get the buy-in from everybody else, even out the cost once the bills are due, and then begin to plan what happens once you're there.
Exactly. All right, we're being honest with one another. Were you at any time when you were all gathered together quietly saying, okay, I've had enough, I'm ready to go home? And what happens if you're in the middle of a reunion and you get that sense?
A week is a long time.
Seriously, if you're not in regular general communication with these folks, it's like you might look at that person and say, I don't know if I really want to spend any more time with them. I mean, this can be a winnowing, can't it? And sort of a forcing out of some transparent feelings, which I think has positive potential.
It has positive potential. And again, it depends. We're an extremely close family. And so we look forward to times together. We're very strong individuals, which means those little times of needing to take a walk on the beach by yourself are going to happen. But it's okay because you go expecting for that to happen.
Right.
When you're dealing with a non-Christian family or a blended extended family in which some know the Lord and others do not, then that raises that whole environment to another level where the ability to expect what's going to happen isn't quite as predictable.
Now, again, and I so appreciate your honesty, Greg. Talk to me about that. If you have believers and non-believers in the same group, but you're all family, so you want to love each other, but there's always that passion, and I bet as an ordained minister, you've heard this a lot, when someone will say, oh, I wish my brother or my mother, these are the most passionate people that they pray for to come to know the Lord, because it is just that, it's family. Give us a practical suggestion about the family dynamics then, if you have a blended group of believers and non-believers.
I would say to be yourself, not to put on airs, not to seize this as an opportunity to do evangelism, but recognize that as you are living out your life with your kids, with your grandkids, in an honest and loving way, if you say something you shouldn't, to be quick to say you're sorry, so that the grace of a Christian family is leaking into the whole environment. And non-believers can actually see Christians in authentic relationship.
That's great advice, Susan.
I think Greg hit on something that's really important, and that is planning and the point person. I have a friend who has a large extended family. Some are believers, some are not believers. They planned a big family reunion at a neutral place, and a lot of planning went into this. And let me just give you one example for what they did. They decided it would be fun to have a family cookbook that represented different recipes from all different generations. And so they sent out a letter announcing the family reunion and said, send us your favorite recipe, but then also tell us whose it was, how they met, or any humorous thing about the person whose dish this belonged to.
What a great idea.
And they put together this book, and then they took many, many copies with them. And what that did was to give the family a sense of identity, even with people that they didn't really know. They read Cousin Joe's crazy recipe that came from Great Aunt Millie, etc., etc. And so having a project is sort of a safe way when you're coming from different perspectives to achieve a little bit of unity.
This is focused on the family, and to our guests, let me just ask this question about family reunions. And Greg, you kind of alluded to this, and that is expectations. How does one go about having good and proper expectations for a family reunion, whether it's the first time or whether it's been a while since they've been together, or maybe they get together regularly and have some foundational premises on which to build those expectations? How do you have the right attitude?
I love what Amy Dickinson, who's the family columnist in Time magazine, wrote after she went to her first family reunion. She chronicled her experience, and she said, I remember pulling up to the reunion in a rental car, looking at the gathered clan and thinking, what are they doing here? So, first a warning, if you attend a family reunion, there is every likelihood you will see your family there. So, that person that doesn't know the Lord yet is probably going to have some salted language. Yeah. Maybe they're going to be sneaking off and imbibing too much, if you know what I mean. Don't expect heaven on earth when that kind of intermingling is taking place.
Even if everybody's a believer and has a similar faith, that does not mean
that's exactly
some fireworks.
So go with your eyes open.
Now, with that same vein, what if someone says, I'm so glad we're going to have this family reunion, and I have chosen to go, and yet I have been disconnected with my sister for years because of some past hurt, some past pain. Good idea, bad idea, and I'd love to hear from both of you on this, to say, this is where we will finally have that confrontation. And you really come all praying prayed up, you think. Maybe your guns are all loaded and this is it. You're going to have that. We're going to get it all out in the open. Bad idea, good idea to family reunion?
What do you think, Susan?
I think it's a bad idea to have it all out at a family reunion. It puts too much pressure. And one of the purposes of a family reunion is to build relationships. Perhaps a better angle for that person to consider is, let me go and love this person I'm alienated from, and if we need to deal with some hard issues, let it be done after the reunion. I think the important thing here is to lower our expectations for what will actually take place at a family reunion, and go with a heart that is just to love the people there, wherever they're coming from. And if you're at odds with a family member, you do all that you can to build bridges. The thing that keeps coming to my mind is we want to live with no regrets. Mm-hmm. So go to the family reunion simply with the intent to love the person, to be a person of grace, and then let the deeper issues get sorted out afterwards.
That's great advice. Wonderful advice. What about going back again to the encumbrances? And I want to tear down some of these burdens. Greg, what about the fact that someone goes, I have 3 little kids. They're all preschoolers, and I know that Aunt Susie doesn't like being around kids, so I'm so nervous and I'm afraid to go with the kids. And yet I know that my Aunt Ellen really wants to see the kids, and you feel torn because if your personality type is such that you're a pleaser, you're going to step right into this reunion knowing you've displeased somebody right out of the gate, and that might be a reason you think not to go. What would you say to that person?
I think there's 2 reasons to let the kids come, if we're going to talk about that specifically. The first is that kids can be a wonderful way of breaking down some of the barriers that maybe have existed. Through their naivete, they don't know that so-and-so isn't speaking to such and such a person, and so they may ask questions. They may even think that Aunt Harriet is a committed Christian when in fact she hasn't been to church in 35 years. And they ask a question about, what do you like about Sunday school? And
it's a great conversation starter, isn't it? That's right.
The other comment I wanted to make about that, and I guess it has to do both with planning and expectations, and that is if you're anticipating having younger children or even teenagers at a gathering like this for more than an afternoon, make sure that you go with plenty of fun things that are kid-friendly for them all to do. If the kids ain't happy, nobody's going to be happy.
Exactly.
And also, I would add in that vein, go to a place that's not too elegant, because one of the things that makes mothers of young children so nervous is they're going to break something. Right. They're going to hurt something. We just had an extended family reunion. There were 3 generations of us at an old camp, and it was perfect because it was after the season, but you could still use the equipment. It was rough cabins. There wasn't anything you could hurt. It was very kid-friendly. And there are many camps that you can rent out of season at a very reasonable price. Another facility often is colleges when they're not in session, because then each person has their own room. You've got big rooms for gatherings, and it's a safe place where parents don't have to worry about my child's going to mess up someone's precious possessions.
You anticipated my question, which is someone whose heart's desire is to do exactly this. In fact, maybe their gifting is helps and administration, and they're the perfect person to start moving this into place. But they're thinking, I want to be tuned in to the financial level of the different family members. It sounds to me that I'm hearing both of you say you don't have to have a whole lot of money to have this, right? You just have to have a desire to do this.
That's exactly right. And I was going to mention, when I heard Susan talking about going to camps, I have friends that go each summer. They do this every year. I don't know how they can do it, but they've been very successful at going to a Christian family camp up in Michigan and tying in with an existing family camp where there are several hundred people, but they go and they're able to worship with the rest of the conferees during the morning. Somebody is there to cook all the meals, so they don't have to do cooking or clean up or any of that. They each have cabins by each other. The kids have programming in the morning, a place to go in the afternoon on playgrounds and whatever to hang out. But then, as they desire to have their own individual extended family time, they've got lodges and rooms to use, and it becomes very affordable that way as well.
Great idea. Susan, more practicals. What are some wonderful ways through games to be able to teach family members about other family members and to be able, if it's a Christian family as an example, to intentionally pass down your faith? What would be some suggestions?
Well, let's start with your last question first, intentionally passing down your faith. One of the things that's really fun to do at family reunions is to assign some of the young teenagers to do devotions, to lead in worship. That's handing it down to the next generation. The younger kids will take it better from a teen than a parent. Teens will take it better from other teens. Just to assign two kids, hey, we want you to lead the devotional on Monday. The two of you do the music. Why don't one of you all write a prayer? I think as our kids get on up into the years, the pre-adolescent, adolescent, and college years, it's great to turn over the spiritual leadership of a family reunion to them.
And the devotions won't be so long, right?
Right. The devotions will be short, and they'll be very pragmatic, which is fun. But there's so many fun things you can do. You can plan a talent show. Say everybody bring a talent that they would like to share. It's not a have to, but it's a want to. So you aren't bound to be in the talent show. But one year when we had an extended family reunion, it happened to be the year of the Summer Olympics, and we were at the beach, and so we had our own Summer Olympics. You know, we did crazy things on the beach. We did things with water balloons. We had trophies. It was just a wonderful way of playing together, again, with 3 and 4 different generations. Some people have talent shows. A recent family reunion of a friend of mine, they had a talent show, and one of the women, one of the young moms is an interior decorator, and she brought a book to share. Her talent was sharing a book of pictures of a home she had just finished. So this enabled, again, it built a sense of connectedness so that we get to know one another a little bit better and get to appreciate one another's gifts.
Greg, let me tell you something about one family reunion that I remembered and then bounce it off of you. I come from a very large ethnic family as well, and when we had family reunions, and we had them all the time, we put all the leaves in the dining room table, so it went as far across the room as you could, and you didn't have one meal served, you had 5 meals served. And I remember getting underneath the dining room table with all of my cousins, and we'd sit cross-legged underneath, and we'd listen to the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents talk, and it was like it was yesterday. I learned so much just about my family, and the times I've wished I could turn back the hands of time, crawl under that dining room table and listen to those stories again. It seems to me this is a great place, without even planning anything, just to be in the body of the family, to learn about who your family is and where you come from.
That's really true, and it's fun to tell stories. Kids love to hear stories. Older people love to tell stories. And for those of us that are kind of caught in between, this is the time to either start using our camcorders, our tape recorders, or to start journaling what we're hearing, so that those stories that you heard as a kid, if written down, can be passed on to the next generation.
Yes.
I wanted to pick up on something that Susan alluded to with regard to intentionally passing on a spiritual heritage. At our family reunion 2 years ago, my father-in-law actually asked us to come prepared to discuss the last in C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, in which it's the last battle, which deals with heaven and death. Wisely, this 70-year-old man who grew up never knowing his biological parents and having been adopted and learning the benefit and wealth of family, now with his own blood relatives, wanting to pass on to them a poignant memory when he will one day not be with us at future family reunions, so that we would begin to anticipate when life and death will separate us one from another, that we have that greater family reunion to look forward to. So we came prepared to discuss metaphorically death, resurrection, heaven. It was very meaningful. It was tearful. The discussions were long, but they were good. And using story was a great bridge into that difficult subject, especially as grandparents begin to anticipate being gone. We had no idea that a month after the family reunion concluded, and we all went back to our respective homes, that the mother of my sister-in-law would be tragically killed unexpectedly in a car accident. She was part of those conversations about when death will come, not anticipating at all that it wouldn't be her mother and father-in-law who had brought this topic to the table, but her own mother, that within a few weeks' time would move to heaven. That conversation, or series of conversations, we are incredibly grateful for, because my father-in-law chose to do the hard thing and discuss something as risky as when the day comes, family, when I'm in heaven, this is what I want you to know.
You know, I was thinking when you were talking about that, so often the quintessential family reunion is around a coffin, isn't it? That's when relatives gather together when they haven't been connected for a while. But if we followed the example that you just talked about, just think of the way in which that would facilitate healing. The grieving process after a death, where you could sit back and remember when you were together as a family and you shared those stories and the hope that you have.
Exactly. It kind of short circuits the grief process in a positive way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, another thing that makes me think of, too, is one of the things that you can do on family reunions is to take time to honor the elder statesman or the elder grandmother or grandfather. And we've done this on occasion where you just go around and you have each person share something that they are thankful for about that person.
I love that.
And it's precious to hear the little children share one thing that they're thankful for about granddaddy or about grandmommy. And the children share. We really get to know one another as we hear the things that we're thankful for. And this becomes a way of honoring that senior family member. And it's also a blessing to tape that, Greg, because that will become a precious memory to hand down for generations. This is what was said about your grandmom, your great-grandmom, that you never knew, but we want you to see what all the different family members appreciated. And, you know, even if you don't especially like everything about somebody, you can, if you try real hard, can think of one thing to be thankful for about them.
Exactly.
So it winds up being a real positive.
You know, you could take your exact example, Susan, and flip it the other way and have the elder members of the family write down on some paper, maybe roll it, tie it like it's a scroll, and hand it to a child who has some knowledge, some capability to be able to understand this and say, this is the most important thing I want to tell you, or this is a promise I want to give you, or this is a part of your family I want you to remember. Can you imagine creating a treasure box, putting all those little scroll pieces in there, and knowing that that box represents all those prayers, all those promises, all those connectedness to your family?
That's a
that
great
would be
idea.
a priceless gift, wouldn't it?
That's a wonderful idea.
Wow.
And that also introduces something that is one of those practical things to do at a family reunion. Assign somebody to be the keeper of the scrapbook and maintain a scrapbook for every one of these special occasions that you plan and experience.
Wow.
And with that, we've come to the end of side one of this Focus on the Family cassette.
I'm just thrilled to get all of the practicals that are a part of this because, John, as we talk to people all the time, we know that there are hindrances here. Finances, geography, family dynamics. But it sounds to me like what Greg and Susan are saying is you have to purpose in your heart that this is an important thing to do. Not because it's an episodic experience, but you really want to say this is a way to build a bridge of connectedness between family members.
Well, and that's been the case for me personally, Janet. We live 800 miles away from one set of grandparents and about 1,100 miles away from the other set of grandparents. And we can go see them at various times, but it's very rare that all of our family is together at one time. And so I've really enjoyed the times that have been intentional about let's all get together, even if it's just that nucleus part of the family. But on my wife's side, they have her dad's side of the family and her mom's side of the family. Every year they have reunions. And we try to make those when we can because there is this sense of history. There's the stories that, Greg, you were sharing about earlier. There are so many different things going on that I want my children to experience before it's too late.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I come from a small family. One brother, me, mom and dad. Like you, John, we live 2,400 miles. Well, not like you, but we live at a distance from our family like you. My wife's family equally far from where we live in Middle America. When Wendy and I were first married, we made a decision that we would spend each vacation to visit our moms and dads and our siblings. We call it the grandparent tour. And for 20 years, we've been doing this.
That's great.
Some have questioned whether or not we shouldn't have our own family vacations. But it tends to be those people who live close to their moms and dads who question whether what we're doing is correct. I have never regretted it. In fact, I think in the 21st century, this becomes one way of defining what it means to honor your mother and your father as they grow older.
Very good. You talked about history. Let me tell you one of the things that I rue, and that is, and I'm going to date myself, we look now at this entire generation of veterans from World War II. Do you remember, and I bet you do too, John, sitting and listening to the stories from my uncles, where they served in World War II, what unit they were in, the things that they saw, and it struck me painfully the other day, that's passing away. Did I write that down? Will I be able to remember to tell my children and my children's children? Because that really is not just family history. That was in the context of world history, wasn't it?
We did that at my mom and dad's place just 2 months ago. My dad has not wanted to talk about his World War II experiences.
It's called the silent generation, isn't it?
Up until just a couple of years ago. He was on the battleship Missouri at the signing of the treaty that ended the Second World War. On the 50th anniversary of that occasion, the silence ended. He became proud of what he had lived through and wanted to share this with his grandchildren. So 2 months ago, as we gathered in his office, video camera in hand, he walking through his little World War II museum with the grandchildren in tow, explaining what he did for his country, and all the while giving praise to God for sparing his life and allowing him to do what he did.
Oh, that puts a lump in my throat. What an amazing story that is. We really do have to thank God for video cameras, don't we? It's a way to store those memories now. But I was thinking also, there really is no limit, is there, Susan, to the creativity here, where you could pull together multi-generations and you could say, let's share the most important thing we've learned in our marriage, whether it's been 6 months or 60 years. You talk about family therapy. I mean, what a wonderful way to be able to share those positives so that you don't have to go through the hard trials you've learned from somebody who's been there before you.
You can, and you can do some of this before the reunion. You can send out a letter to everybody that you're inviting, if we're talking about a large extended family reunion, and have them send back just a mini bio. What am I interested in? What is my hobby? What am I doing these days? What's one verse of Scripture that has been meaningful to me? What's one prayer request? Simply, what's my favorite book of the year? And again, you will have to adapt the question so that if someone is not a believer, they're not made to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
So include my favorite book of the year or my favorite movie of the year, and have this all typed up. Have it copied. Take booklets for every member coming to the family reunion to present to them on the first day or the first evening of the reunion. So they sort of, in a way, have a cheat sheet of who's who.
Oh, that's
so
wonderful.
So that when Joe sees Sally and he thinks, oh my goodness, she's my second cousin, I don't even know where to begin to have a conversation with her because I don't know what she's doing in life. He can quickly flip to Sally in her bio and know how to have a conversation with her. So this is just an aid, because the truth of the matter is it can be awkward if you're at a large family reunion and you haven't seen someone in years and you don't know how to begin a conversation.
That's right.
You need a little help. And another thing that you can do so that when you go to a family reunion, you don't just stick with the cousins that you're the closest to, and we become a family reunion of small cliques that all just want to be with whom they already know, is you can have one of your early dinners have place cards where the point person has thought through a mixer and mixing up people that might not have regular contact with each other. You can also put all the names of the people there in a hat and draw them out and say, this is your dinner partner for the evening. And mix the children and the adults. Too often, I think we put adults all in one room and the children all in the other room.
At the little card table,
At the
right?
little card table. And that's sometimes good, but you don't want to do that the whole time. You need a balance.
I'm
of
liking
both.
this. Here's what I thought. Okay, I've got 5 kids. Let's see, I can divvy them up so I don't have to have any of them right next to me. I don't have to cut any food. I don't have to clean up for any of them.
You'll have
That's
to
a
have all
great
your
idea,
nieces and
Susan.
nephews to cut
But
their
at the
food
talent
up.
show, John, we want you to play trombone.
That would be a losing moment there. My
Well,
goodness.
I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's somebody listening who said, oh, that's my heart. I really want to do it. I have 2 questions. Number one, Susan, you alluded to this a little bit. When you're looking, and you talked about swinging from the family tree, I thought, Greg, try as we like, we really can't swing too far from our family tree, can we? How do you make sure that you haven't said, well, that's the good side of the family, that's the bad side of the family? When you start to make the list, it's like a wedding, Susan. You've gone through this 5 times. How do you make sure... you'd have to decide whether you want narrow or extended. But if you move to extended, how do you do it so that you don't hurt some other family member who is going to find out sooner or later? So where do you begin to put that list together?
Well, I think the first thing is you need to be getting together with your own immediate family on a regular basis. Now, that's simple if your children are all at home. It's a little more complicated as for those of us who are empty nesters and our kids get married and move out. And so my priority with my 5 married children is that we have time together each year. But then my husband and I both come from huge families, and the longing is to be able to get those families together. And I think the truth of the matter is you can't do it every year. It's too much. It can become a command performance. It can make people feel stressed. So I would say if you want to have a large family reunion, include everybody. Plan it a year out or even a year and a half out, and just trust God that those that he wants there are going to come. We need to err on the side of graciousness and not err on the side of limitation. And that's why I have it in a place that's not expensive.
Yes, very good word.
Because it will enable people to be more likely to come.
And rotate the leadership, so the point person isn't always the point person.
Right.
Because that can be
gets to be a dull point after all. It's hard work. That's right.
Very hard work.
Well, that goes to the heart of my second question, Greg, and let me direct it to you, and that is to the individual listening who said, that's it. I want to do this because I love and I value family. Where do you start? What is step number 1?
I would say that step number 1 is getting buy-in by floating a balloon and seeing what kind of interest is aroused. And as if you are talking positively about something that you feel passionately about and want to see it happen, it's likely that you're also going to enthuse those that you want to be part of it. So have a pitch that this is going to happen and we want you all to come. So go on record for saying, we're going to have a family reunion. Will you help make it happen? That's where it starts. Then you can go to websites, and computers are wonderful when it comes to identifying places to go, activities to incorporate. I got to say this. One of the ways that we knew we had hit a home run with our family reunion, really the first extended one we ever did, was the fact that now the kids are saying, when are we going to do it again? They want to plan accordingly. And this includes college-age kids that it's hard to get them to not do summer jobs in order to come to something like this. But the kids want to do it, so we're going to do it again. I think the popularity of that movie that came out a little while ago called My Big Fat Greek Wedding, my family, the fact that sleeper comedy became such a blockbuster hit says something about the appetite and hunger in our culture for families that want to be connected and find that same kind of belonging.
I would just add to what Greg said is that you might want to start with a long weekend and not a whole week. I think it's safer to do something brief that has a higher chance of success than something long where people might grow weary of one another. So I would say if this is your first one, make it, a weekend.
Exactly.
And I would say also enlist as many people as you can to be a part of the planning. The more people that feel ownership, the more involved and committed they'll be to coming, and the better it'll be. Assign one of the young mothers the fun and games for the toddlers. Assign one of the gourmet cooks to organize a special meal. Pair up teams to cook if you're in a place where you have to do the cooking and cleaning so that no one gets saddled with all of the responsibility. Assign one to have a panel one night with scintillating questions, perhaps teenagers, things I always wanted to know but were afraid to ask. So spread out the responsibilities, then you have much more involvement and much more ownership, and therefore a greater likeliness of success.
Yes.
Susan, would you tend to think that there is a proportionality to the number of people that you're anticipating and the length of time that you're together?
That's a very good question. When it's a large group, it's hard to have any significant conversation if you just have it for one day. It's going to be superficial communication. So I would say, that's why 2 or 3 nights is a good amount of time. However, it's also going to depend on how far people are coming. and where they live. You know, if your family all lives in one area, you can have a briefer one.
We're going to take some questions and comments from some of our friends in the gallery today. May we have your name, please, and your story?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Husher, and I'm from Colorado Springs. And we had our first family reunion this year. And we had it at a big state park in Nebraska where they had a lodge where the cooking was done for us. And there were lots of things for the teens to do. There was paddle boats and swimming and hiking and just a lot of things to keep them busy. And one of the great things was I was adopted by my stepdad at age 16, and my sister was 5, and he had a daughter that was older than us and was already out on her own, and she's lived in Wisconsin. So we had this first family reunion, and we were able to connect with Beverly and get to know her, and it was a real sweet moment when we were taking the pictures, and Dad said, I want all of my daughters to come up here and take a picture. And so we got a unity that we didn't have before. It was a great privilege.
Wow, that's great. So let me ask a follow-up question to that, if I can. So to other people who are wondering whether or not they should have their first family reunion, what would you tell them?
Oh, go for it. I mean, email really did make it easy. We did all our planning between us on email, and we did it with very little money. We each made small decorations and just brought them with us. And we had the T-shirts, of course, which we're all glad to have. We brought photographs, especially of the older grandparents that weren't with us, the older aunt and uncles, and then we passed them around, and they told us who they were and something about their family. And so I learned a lot of things from the broadcast today that I wish we would have done, but then we can incorporate that into our next reunion.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's other ways of maintaining that connection, too, other than just reunions, by having a Christmas letter that you commit to send to those members of the family, that you begin to journal and share journal entries, maybe that you even form video composites of family snapshots, visual snapshots on video that you could share with one another through the mail.
And email is a wonderful way to stay in touch, too, with the greater extended family. Often you can just start an add-on email that goes from one person to the next that just throughout the whole, may take a year for it to get around to all of the family, but each person just adds a little blurb, an update on what's happening in their life.
I think a grandmother and a grandfather's one of their greatest anxieties is, will our kids remain as connected when we're gone as we have sought to make happen while we're still living? And that may be a legitimate concern. That's why I'm committed, maybe as the family archivist, to see that we do the necessary work to maintain these bonds, so that is going to be the natural byproduct rather than something that we have to work at with a sense of obligation, making happen.
You know, I would just add one thing to that, too. As we become empty nesters and our children get older and are adults and are married, our heart does beat that they continue to grow with each other. And so I think those of us who are parents with adult children need to do everything that we can to make it easy for our kids to be with each other and not feel that we always have to be there.
That's right.
You know, when you have a large family, I have 5 children, and it gives me the greatest joy in the world when my daughter and her husband in Southern California make an attempt to get with her brother and his wife in Vancouver. I want to do whatever I can to help that happen. If it means taking care of kids, if it means helping out financially. So I think we put a different hat on when we have adult children, and we think, what can I do, very practically speaking, whether it's financial aid, whether it's babysitting, what is it that will enable my children to get with each other, and I may not even be there.
I love that. Can you think of a way that has happened besides just providing financial help or offering to babysit, in terms of suggesting things that they might do together?
Susan, I'll jump in while you're collecting your thoughts, because one thing that came to my mind immediately, Greg, was my wife's aunt. Now, this is similar but a little bit different, Susan. My wife's aunt every year does something with all of her kids. She's in her 70s. She took them whitewater rafting a couple of years ago. So she's facilitating those kinds of things, and my expectation is that the kids will get together whether she's offering to do that or not down the road.
Because she set the ball in motion.
Well, exactly. And if you set the example, Susan, you know that we have 4 adult children as well. And in theory, it's an empty nest, although Dr. Dobson says it's not an empty nest until their junk is out of the garage.
That's right,
so I know it's not an empty nest yet. But I have to tell you, 3 are relatively close together, and 1 is on the West Coast, and they will, without us, get together. Can we come up over the weekend and spend some time with you? And what we've done is say to our children, remember, your siblings are your siblings forever.
That's right.
And you want to nurture that relationship. And get your sibling to know your spouse, because that is an add-on member to our family. So I think if we as the parents can set that example and let them see that and let them know that we don't always have to be there. They have some great times.
Great freedom.
Exactly.
One of the things that we did after we were all together in January was we said to the kids, you know, the one thing that would mean the most to us after this week is if we could be more disciplined about communicating with each other over the internet. And what we would ideally love, we're not going to be legalistic about this, but what we would really love is if every other week one of the couple would email a family email. Because I want to hear from my 3 sons-in-law and my 2 daughter-in-laws just as much as I want to hear from my own children. So now we have this kind of family email going on all the time where hopefully, and we don't always make it, you know, inevitably people get overwhelmed, but somebody is writing an email to the rest of the family, and that gives us a real sense of feeling connected.
Well, Greg has been bringing up this 21st century technology, and let me tell you what this baby boomer who's gone kicking and screaming into the 21st century has learned. One of our children has created a web page, and he happens to be the father of the first grandchild that we have.
I bet that's a beautiful sight.
It is. He updates this, Greg, and then he emails it to a list as long as my arm of family members on a regular basis. And my mother-in-law, who doesn't have a computer, went to her son-in-law's house to crank up the website just to see the website pictures that my son had sent. So the point is, even though time and space and distance are there in our families, in one click of a mouse, you can be connected, can't you?
That's really true. I wanted to ask you, Janet, something you said earlier about those days a few years ago under the family table with all the leaves. Are you still in contact with any of those other cousins that you shared that floor space with?
I am indeed. And I think it's because there's a bonding there. And, you know, you made reference to a popular movie not too long ago. And that movie tugged at my heart because I remembered the joy of extended family. I remembered what it was like to hear the stories of my aunts and my uncles and my grandfather. And I have to tell you that I'm very, very thankful that my mother and father are so pro-family, for lack of a better word, that they burn that into my heart, and then in turn I get to pass it on to my children. I don't want them to miss what I had growing up because that's one of the treasures of my heart.
One of my favorite possessions is a picture, a photograph I took of my mother-in-law, who is 95 years old, kneeling by her bed a couple of years ago in her old lady nightgown with her walker beside her, praying for her 4 children and their spouses, her 12 grandchildren, her almost 10 great-grandchildren, and the legacy that is for us. And this photograph simply represents what each of us and what each of our children want to be one day. We want to be that older person who's praying down the generations for kids who will love the Lord and for kids who will love each other. And she's a tremendous hero to me as I look at that picture of her faithfulness over all of these years and praying through the coming generations.
I love that. Not everybody has that picture, either literally or did not grow up with a grandmother like that. And that's one of the reasons I am so pro-family reunion. It's because of the opportunity to start again, to reprogram broken pasts.
That's good.
The mother and father of my wife both came from very dysfunctional backgrounds, but they have tasted the sweet joy of having begun a new family legacy, having come to faith in Christ themselves, served on the mission field, raising godly kids that now are passing the baton, which is what family reunions, in a very creative sense, provide that athletic arena where the family of faith baton continues to be passed on.
You know, the truth of the matter, as you say, Greg, is that no matter what you come from, no matter what age you are, you can be the first of a generation of healthy families. And that's the hope we have.
We said early on in our discussion, Greg, that your pen often gets dipped in an inkwell full of poetic directives. You've written a poem that deals with the essence of family reunions. Would you give us the title, and would you share that poem with us?
I'd be happy to. Upon reflection of our family reunion, I captured these thoughts. I've called it First Family Envy, and I think you'll know why I called it that once I start to read it. It goes like this. I don't think I'm the first to envy the first families, and I'm sure I won't be the last. Just think about it. The White House isn't the only spot where the presidents go when it gets hot. Historically, they've gone to some pretty cool places. The Eisenhowers camped out at Camp David. The Kennedys settled in at Hyannisport. The Bushes bunked down at Kennebunkport. And there is something about those family gatherings that we longingly look up to. Chances are most extended clans will never own their own sprawling, secluded estate like the Reagan's Ranch in the Golden State. But boasting a deed to acres of privately owned land is not what we really desire. If the truth were known, what we really find attractive about presidential retreats is extended time in a relaxed setting with people we love and don't see nearly enough, and those with whom we share a common past. From time to time, every family needs to make time and find a place where kids can embrace grandparents and play with cousins, and where adults contemplate the faithfulness of God as they fertilize the family tree.
Outstanding. That's great. Greg Asimakoupoulos, I thank you so much. What a wonderful poem. And you know what? It really, I think, has created a spark in hearts today, that people have to realize that this isn't something that's of bygone days, that we can do this today if we make that decision. You two are still doing it, and I think that you've started a conversation today that's going to be a spark in some hearts that's going to turn into a full-blown flame for family reunions. So I thank you, Greg. Susan Yeats, I thank you as well. This has been a delightful discussion.
Thank you for having me. And our next family reunion, I think, is going to be in Colorado Springs. This is one gorgeous place.
And thank you both. It's been great to be here with you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Greg.
We've been listening to our guest host for the past couple of days, Janet Parshall, who agreed to fill in for Dr. Dobson as we talked about family reunions. And we do thank our guests for joining us on Focus on the Family and making this a really fun discussion. I certainly hope as you've listened in that you've picked up some helpful ideas, a few pointers on keeping the family closer together, and that you'll take advantage of this good information and put it to use and start or continue a tradition of family reunions. We do want to encourage you in any way that we can, and we've provided a link from our website to a great article about family reunions written by Greg Asimakoupoulos for Christianity Today. You can go to our website at family.org and look for that link to get some more wonderful ideas about this subject.
And with that, we've come to the end of this Focus on the Family program. We hope that this material has been helpful to you, and we welcome your questions or comments on this or any other family-related topic. Our address is Focus on the Family, Colorado Springs, Colorado, 80995. And our phone number is 1-800, the letter A, and then the word family. That's 1-800-232-6459. In Canada, please write to us at this address, Focus on the Family, Box 9800, Vancouver, BC, V6B 4G3. And the phone number is 1-800-661-9800. And thank you for listening.